I did my first powerlifting meet 8 years ago. At that meet, I had a 680 kilo total, or just about 1,500 pounds or so. And that was comprised of a 535 pound squat, a 353 pound bench press, and a 611 pound deadlift. Fast forward 8 years, and just recently, as in last month, I had my best meet ever. And if you compare these two meets, I've added 365 kilos, or just about 800 pounds to my total over that time frame. If you average that out over the time, that's obviously about 100 pounds per year, or just about 45 kilos or so. And one of the most common questions that I get asked is, Rondell, how do you keep pushing forward? How do you keep adding kilos to your total? And how do you avoid plateaus? Now, I've actually made a video on this already, and this video that you're watching right now is actually part 2 to this. And in the first video, I said that one of the most overlooked things when it comes to avoiding plateaus is the art of building and maintaining momentum in your training. In that video as well, I introduced you guys to a concept that I coined AGWA, A-G-W-A. And AGWA is an acronym, and it stands for Analyze and Understand, Goal Set, Work Backwards, and the A, the last A, stands for Assess and Adjust. And this methodology is something that I sort of like stumbled upon without even really knowing it, and I've been executing on it for a while. And it was only like earlier this year that I decided to turn it into like an actual thing, actual like 4-step process that people could follow. So in this video, what I'm gonna do that is different than the last video is that I'm actually gonna break down my prep leading into my last meet. I had an entire 6-month prep, and it covered just about 5 phases or so. And what I wanna do is actually break down that prep and how I utilize the AGWA method to build momentum leading up to the massive PRs that you guys saw in the gym and the world record breaking performance that I had at the meet. And hopefully I could kind of like impart you guys with, my mindset or my knowledge, and you guys could see how I applied this in my prep with videos where I made mistakes, everything like that, and be able to kind of like apply it to you guys' preps or meet peaks coming up. So I have a screen recording here. You guys could see this is basically the entire layout of the prep right here. So you can see at the bottom there that I have 5 different phases leading up to that last phase, which was the peak itself. And this is the actual structure of how my programming was laid out. Now, one thing I want to tell you guys, and I'll tell you guys about it a little bit later as well, is that I actually have my first ever program dropping next week, and it is Rondell Hunt, the Total Specialist program. I decided to name it the Total Specialist because a couple of people recommended that because I couldn't come up with a name for the program, and everybody was like, like obviously my Instagram name is Deadlift Lord 868, but I just sort of like turned into like a more like well-rounded lifter, sort of like on every lift. So yeah, the Total Specialist. So yeah, I'll tell you guys about it a little bit later, but it's basically more or less my exact same programming with some tweaks and customization, which allows you guys to personalize it to you. And yeah, it's honestly one of the best programs that we've done. But let's hop into the actual prep here and break down how I utilize AGWA in this. So the first thing here you guys could see is that this phase was the first one that I got. So this was a little bit more of a volume phase, just to go through the general structure, because the structure didn't change throughout the entire prep, right? So day 1 was bench press, and then some accessories. Had the top setter bench there, so this was the main bench day. Day 2, this is the main squat day with some bench volume and then a secondary deadlift. Day 3, this is my secondary bench press day. So I had a single on this day throughout the entire prep, followed by some volume and accessories. And then day 4, I had my main deadlift session with a secondary squat and then some accessories, right? Now, the first A here is analyze and understand. So how I sort of like applied this now to this entire prep is that when I got this phase, I realized that just simply having one phase isn't enough. So what I mean by that is, with this phase, I could see what the next 4 weeks are laid out in front of me. However, if I was self-coached, but in this case I do have a coach, Sanjeev, I would want to understand not just what this phase is about and how this phase will be structured, but I want to have a general understanding as to like how the next 4 or 5 phases leading into the meet are going to be structured as well. So I had a talk with Sanjeev, and I was just like, okay, what is the vision that you have for the next 4 phases? I didn't necessarily need him to write the phases, but I also wanted to understand what the vision was, especially for those main movements. So in this case, that was the bench top set here, which we started off with 5s. That was the pause squat top set here. We started off with a pause squat triple. And that was the deadlift set here, which is the 1x4. And I really wanted to understand how we were going to progress these top sets. I didn't need to know about accessories. I didn't need to know about overall volume, anything like that. Like, all that is, kind of like secondary. I really just wanted to know, okay, how are we going to progress these top sets all the way up to potentially singles, or maybe I might do doubles in the last phase. I never know. And it was more so from a perspective of me just wanting to know, because, I trust Sanjeev wholeheartedly. So I just really wanted to know so that I could apply myself, right? So this is what he told me, and this is exactly what we ended up doing. So with bench, the progression here for phase 1, you could see it was a 1x5. For phase 2, you could see it was a 1x4. Phase 3, you could see it was a 1x3. Phase 2, it was a 1x2. And then phase 1, it was a 1x1, so single stand off on the bench there. With the squat, you can see we started off with a pause squat triple. Then you can see we actually repeated pause squat triples for this next phase. And then you can see that we went on to regular squat triples. And then for phase 4 here, we went on to regular doubles. And then we finally ended off with singles on the squat there. For the deadlift, it was 4s on phase 1, phase 2 was triples, phase 3 was doubles, and then phase 2 was also doubles, and then phase 5, or the peak, was singles. So you can see that each one was a little bit different there, and that is why you really want to communicate with your coach. Bench was the most straightforward. We had 5 phases, and we went all the way from top sets of 5 all the way down to singles. But communicating with your coach, or again, sort of like pre-planning this, if you coach yourself, is very, very critical, because not all things will be progressed the same. On squats, I went from a variation top set to all the way down to singles. On deadlift, I went from 4s and repeated doubles and then got down to singles. And then on bench press, I went from 5s all the way to singles. So each one will be progressed a little bit differently. So in the analyze and understand phase, I have to kind of like internalize that and really look at things from a macro perspective. In the last video, I was just simply talking about on a phase to phase perspective, sort of like, okay, phase 1, how would we use agua? In this video, I really want to break down how you could use it on a bigger scale to kind of like look at each block as not necessarily an individual thing, but look at each block as sort of like a almost like a building block in building up a wall or building up a house or a fortress that is your meat, right? So that was the A, or the analyze and understand step. So now that I understand the overall layout and structure, I move on to the second step, which is G, goal set, right? Now, the goals here, you can see that I put IG, stands for initial goal. The initial goals I had were 573 on bench, 848 on squat, and then 904 on deadlift, right? Now, why and how did I come up with these goals? I didn't just pull these goals, out of nowhere, or like pull them out of a hat and just randomly say, hey, I want to bench this. If that was the case, I would have probably picked, 600 for bench. But I picked these goals based on my previous training. I picked these goals based on the length of time that I had. I know I had 6 months to build, and I thought that all these goals would be reasonable given the time frame. And I also took into consideration what I felt like I had to do in training in that last phase in order to set myself up for exactly what I wanted at the meet. So again, I picked these numbers at the time. My best bench was 562. So 10 pounds up on that is very, very reasonable for a 6-month time frame. My best squat at the time was 816, but it was very easy. So I thought 848 would be a good number. And then 904 on deadlift. At this point, I had pulled 881 4 times. So I thought 904 would be a reasonable goal. And that's how I set these, right? So goal setting is a crucial step. And honestly, it's probably the most crucial step in this whole thing, aside from analyzing and understanding. And the reason why it's so crucial is because if you set the wrong goals for yourself, you could mess up this entire thing. And this entire thing could be, it could almost just not work for you if you set the wrong goals. So for example, if I had set my bench goal at 600, now all of a sudden I would have had a dominoing effect of just failures because I was reaching too far based on the amount of time that I had. If I had a 2-year time span and I was kind of like building up to that, then maybe I would have been able to set 600 as my goal. But over a 6-month time span, considering my training age, considering the rate of progression I've seen for myself in the past, considering all these different things, 573 was a reasonable goal. And goal setting is very, very critical. And this is also something you collaborate on with your coach on, in terms of what is the right goal, what do you need, etc. Right? Just to give you guys an example as to how these related to me for the meet, 573 bench, usually what I bench in the gym, I bench 2.5 up or down from that in the meet. Squat, usually I squat very much so below what I do at the meet. So for example, when I squatted the 816 at the meet, my best squat in training was 760. So yeah, I was probably a little bit too ambitious with the squat, but I'll get into the errors that I made, a little bit later. And then deadlift. Usually with the deadlift, it is about what I do in training. But yeah, I also get into different things and collecting data and stuff like that in a little bit as well. So these were the goals that I set. Now, the W in AGUA stands for work backwards. Now, on a face-to-face basis, if you guys watched the last video, you would see that what I said about working backwards was basically that you want to take anywhere from 2 to 4% jumps per week leading up to that top set. So in this case here, you can see with the 904 deadlift, these were the jumps I took. I believe these were somewhere closer to like the 3 to 4% range, and these were the jumps I took up to that. Now, on a macro perspective, looking at it from a multi-phase perspective, multi-training phase perspective, or a macro cycle perspective, the way how you want to work backwards is just simply asking yourself the question of, what do I need to do in this phase to set myself up for that next goal? And again, once it is you have set a reasonable end goal, considering the time frame and considering your rate of progression, all these things will automatically work themselves out. So you'll be able to see that in my working backwards, if we take a look at bench, for example, 573, I came to the conclusion that, okay, for a double, I would probably need 551 for that double in order to set myself up for that 573 bench press. For the triple, I said I would probably need 529 to set myself up for that. For the set of 4, I'd probably need 507. And then for the set of 5, I'd probably need 463. Now, all these goals need to be double checked against what you've done in the past. So for example, let's say here, I felt like, okay, I needed to do 551 in order to set me up for a 573 bench press, but I haven't done anywhere near that for a double or even, multiple reps. Let's say my best double at the time was like, I don't know, 515 pounds, right? That would be totally unrealistic. Even though it's what I would have needed to do in order to get to that 573, I would possibly want to change that around just because it's way too far over my old PR. My old PR in this case was 540. So I felt that it was reasonable to aim for 551. And that's sort of like how I went back, kind of like double checking everything. On squat 529, my old PR was 518 for a triple. So that's just a 10 pound on a triple. 507, my old PR was 496, again 10 pounds. And then 463, this actually matched my old PR for 5. I didn't even push this particular phase just because it was the first phase. But yeah, in working backwards and sort of like trying to set yourself up, you also want to double check what you are doing with what you've done in the past, just to make sure that it is not a total reach. Also, one of the reasons why I want to do that is because everybody's different, you know what I mean? So I might need to bench 551 for a double in order to bench 573. However, someone else might need to bench, 562 for a double in order to bench 563. Or they might need to bench 535 for a double in order to bench 573. So everybody's a little bit different. So double checking what you've done with what you're about to do is extremely critical for the work backward step. On the deadlift here, you could see that 904 was what I wanted to end off with. So for that second set of triples on phase 4, I was looking to end off with 881. For the first set of doubles, I was looking to end off with 848. 826 is what I was looking for triples, and then sets of 4 was 771. Now, the last step in this is the assess and adjust phase. And this is a very critical stage. One of the biggest things about this, right, and this is actually where I want to get into like a little bit of like I guess like mental philosophy when it comes to training, right? One of the most critical things about your training, if you're applying this method or applying any method or anything like that, is two things. One, you have to be able to look at things objectively, and you have to be able to take your bias or your attachment to certain things out of it. So, for example, in the case of me setting my bench goal at 573, let's say I used to bench on pound plates. I might have wanted to bench 584 or 585 6 plates just because it is 6 plates and just because it is a milestone. So it's very possible to get like emotionally attached to certain things, and it's very possible to just kind of like set this plan up and get emotionally attached to it, even when you should be taking on the last step here, which is the assess and adjust. And I'll really get into the errors that I personally made. Now, as another caveat to this entire thing, and this is something that I mentioned in the last video as well, for this particular prep, in order for me to make these numbers work, in order for me to be able to set a goal 5 phases out and then execute on it, phase after phase after phase, I had to make my life very predictable. So what I mean by that is my daily number of steps, daily protein intake, total calories, just like general stress, sleep, all these different things, supplementation, all these different things were within one standard deviation of each other every single day for this entire prep. So I gave my body that consistency so that I could have predictability in my training. So what I would mean by that is, if let's say, let me start off with the first 2 phases here. Let's say I did 463 for a set of 5 on the bench press, right? But let's say that particular phase, I was completely locked in. My stress was low. I didn't have much things to do. Let's say I was on vacation. I was just training, eating, right? That went well. But let's say for phase 2, my stress levels are through the roof. I'm not sleeping. I'm partying. I'm drinking. All these different things. Nutrition is trash. Under-eating, overeating, randomly, all these different things. That 463 would no longer be applicable to this phase in terms of what it indicates. And the reason for that is because outside variables are critical. Your strength could take a 5, 10, 15% hit depending on certain variables. So for example, if it is for one phase, you sleep 8 hours a night, eat 1 to 1 grams of protein, you gain 10,000 steps a day, you're doing mobility work, all these different things, your supplementation is on point, creatine, everything like that. In one particular phase, you would probably be very close to 100% strength throughout that phase. Let's say the next phase, you're sleeping, 4 hours a night, supplementation is not on point, you're gaining, 1,500 steps a day, no mobility work, no supplementation, no creatine, no hydration, nothing like that. You could possibly be at 85 to 90% strength throughout that phase, And that would mean that what you did in the previous phase no longer applies to you because you are not as strong as you were then because your variables are trash. Hopefully that makes sense, right? So that's a couple things to take in there. And if you guys want to see kind of like how I personally locked in for most of this prep, honestly, there were some days where I was off, things like that. I could have done like a better job. I would probably say, 80 to 85% of the time during this prep, I was locked in. If you guys want to see that, there is a video, I'll put it in the description, or you could just search on my channel. It's called How to Optimize Strength Gain, or Everything I Do to Optimize Strength Gain, or something like that. I'll probably make a part 2 to that video as well, right? But that was that. Hopefully those caveats make sense to you guys, right? Now, looking at the assess and adjust phase, right? This is where I personally kind of like faltered a little bit throughout this prep. And I'll kind of like walk you guys through as to why, right? So let me start off with the bench, just because the bench went perfectly, right? So for the bench, I hit a 463 pound set of 5 for phase 1. And I actually did this while traveling and everything like that, so my outside stressors were high, right? And that actually went pretty well, surprisingly. And that sort of like set me up for the next phase where my stressors were lower. And I was able to do this 507 set of 4, and it was actually pretty easy as well. And from there, I was locked in. I was home all the time, no traveling, all variables on point. 529 for a triple went well. 551 for a double went well. And that led up to 573 for a single, which went really, really well. And then I PR'd even that in the meet, which was a 578 pound bench press at the meet. So bench was literally flawless. The plan was executed flawlessly. I PR'd every single phase. I was locked in. I was dialed in. Couldn't have asked for more there, right? Now, squat was probably the shakiest out of the 3. So I'll go through that one now so you can see how it kind of like contrasted with that, right? One thing to note with the bench press as well is that even though it was going really well and I felt like I had more in the tank, at no point did I ever deviate from the plan and start to, maybe I could add more weight, to this or XYZ. That's one of the worst things that you could do. Get ahead of yourself when you already understand the plan. If the plan is going well, just stick to the plan. The plan already has PRs in place, so there's no need to ever up the plan or be more aggressive. That's where you could sort of like falter. And I'll show you guys personally where I faltered here, right? So you can see here for that first pause triple, my end goal was 705. So I actually did that and it went pretty well. It was pretty easy. And surprisingly at this point, straight out of my last meet, which was the Arnold before Nationals here, I felt really, really good. So I had 705, that was really good. On to phase 2, my goal was 727, but again, I got ahead of myself. And because I did, I actually picked 744 for that pause triple. So I again got ahead of myself and decided to push 744 for that pause triple. And that is kind of where things started to go downhill. Because I did that 744 triple, I believe I accumulated a little bit more fatigue than I would have liked. That 744 pause triple. And what that sort of caused is that as I came into this next phase, although I was able to hit the 771 triple, regular triple, on squat for phase 3, last rep was maybe a little bit harder than I liked. And I don't believe that since then I recovered coming into the meet correctly. Because everything after that was just a little bit harder than I expected it to be based on how the pause stuff went. So what I mean by that is for phase 4, when my goal was 815 for a double, I actually only hit it for 1, and it was much harder than I expected it to be. Again, based on the fact that 771 was already like a 30 pound PR, and I had already squatted 815 for 1 based on my old triple. So I would have expected to be able to squat it for 2, but again, I just think the fatigue levels were a little bit too high there, and that was because I got ahead of myself and I did not stick to the plan. And then throughout the peak, again, this is where I got ahead of myself as well. Notoriously for me, I don't need to squat that much in training in order to have a big comp squat, right? Or a big squat in competition. And I got ahead of myself here with this 826 because coming into it, I did my last warm up at 771 or 782 or whatever it was, and it was hard. Like it moved okay, but you know that feeling where it's like this is harder than it should be, and I definitely got ahead of myself, and yeah, I just went with 826, even though I should have kept it at 771 for the day and just saved it for the meet. And that kind of like affected me at the meet because I did hit 848 in the meet, but it was completely RP10, and it just, you know, didn't go well. So hopefully that's a lesson you guys could learn there, is that even though things start going well, there's no need to adjust the plan upward. The plan is the plan for a reason. Stick to the plan, be objective, be laser focused. Right now, onto the deadlift. The deadlift here, all right, so I'll be like completely straight with you guys, right? I got very, very caught up with social media for this deadlift. And this is where I should have been objective and did the assess and adjust phase as it is intended to be done. So what I mean by that is, you guys can see here for phase 1, I set my goal as 771 for a set of 4. Now, when I pulled that, it was difficult. It was more difficult than I intended. I was doing cluster sets, so by the last rep, I was very fatigued. Grip was, you know, a little bit tough, everything like that. It was just a rough set. What that should have told me in the assess and adjust, you know, like mindset, while I already have the plan made out, is that I should have gone lighter with this deadlift triple here. So my best triple at the time was 816 for a triple. And I should have gone with 816 here again, or maybe even 804, and just took the time to build. I was so far from competition, I didn't need to do this, but I ended up pulling 826, and I missed the third rep just at the knees, and that obviously, you know, wasn't good. That's because I got caught up in social media. That was when like Bob and Ashton and everything like that were kind of like really popping off and moving numbers that were very close to mine, and I was just like, nah, I need to, like, those guys in 110, I'm in 125. I need to be stronger than them. So, yeah, don't be like me. Don't get caught up in what other people are doing. Focus on yourself, right? So I finally snapped out of it when I failed this 826 triple. And I was like, you know what? I can't run someone else's race, or I can't let someone else dictate my like my pace or my cadence in my training. My training is my training. I don't need to impress anyone, you know. So 826 there failed for a triple, and so what I did was I down regulated this 848 here to 838. Because I'd already done 826 for a double last phase, I figured 838 would be there for a double, and it was, and that went pretty decently. And I set my goal as 860 for the following phase, even though I wanted to double 881 in that last phase before the peak. 860 is what I set at the goal, and that went really well also. And I was actually still able to finish off with my goal of 904 in training, and it wasn't really even RP10, it was more like a 9.5, right? So that goes to show you that even in the assess and adjust phase, a lot of times you could down regulate your goals for a particular phase, but then still have the exact same, like still finish off in the exact same spot. So you don't necessarily need to kill yourself in a particular phase in order to see the progress that you want to see. It's really just about like pacing yourself, building up, and you know, you'll be surprised what your body could pull off later down if you give it time, without kind of like, you know, pushing yourself like way too hard, right? Now, what I'm gonna do is let me look through some of the questions I had listed out here, and I'll answer them if there was anything that I had missed. Right, so one of the things I wanted to talk about here is two things really. So the first one is, I'll just show you guys a brief example as to how I applied agua, not just on a macro scale, but on a micro scale here as well. So you can see for the last phase here, that 2 to 4% jump thing per week is what I did. So basically, this was me working backwards. So once I set the goal, I worked backwards within this within each phase as well. I would just work backwards there, and I just kind of like assessed and adjusted as need be. So the goal setting was done on a macro level, the analyzing and understanding was done on a macro level, and then the working backwards and the assessing and adjusting was done both on a micro level and a macro level, both within the phase and throughout the entire like macro cycle, right? And then one of the things I wanted to talk about as well was the importance of data collection. So what I mean by that is training should be seen as data. Like, a lot of people see training in a very emotional light, where it's like, oh, well, this was this and this was that, and you're up, you're down, you're happy, you're sad, all these different things. Or this was a great session, or this was a bad session, things like that. And while that is important, and while you should feel good while training, a lot of times things should just be taken as data points that could be corrected later on. So, for example, with me leading into this prep, one of the big data points that I've took away is that I need to push my squat way less than I think in training. Focus on the bench, focus on the deadlift, and the squat will show up. I can't fatigue myself on the squats because of the way that I do squat. And that was something I wasn't necessarily sad about. It was just a data point to be collected, and training should be seen as data. Things go well, what could I learn from it? Things go bad, what could I learn from it? Because the end goal is always going to be progression, right? So yeah, hopefully you guys learned a lot there in terms of how I broke down like my actual prep leading into this competition. This was my best prep yet, and I think the next one is going to be even better. Again, because of that data collection thing, I understand what I need to do here to fine tune my performances and gain more strength consistently. So who knows, if I gain 100 pounds on my total again in the next calendar year, that would that would literally put me up to what? That would be 1090. If I do hit 1090 within like 2024, 2025-ish, yeah, I'm definitely gonna like clip this video, put it on my Instagram, because that's absolutely wild, right? But yeah, as I said, I was gonna tell you guys about the Total Specialist program. So if you guys are interested in more content like this and actually understanding the mindset of how like higher level athletes apply themselves to training and get the most out of their training, apply themselves to a training block to really optimize the progress and speed it up as much as possible, you guys can check out my program. I'll have more videos like this in the program, longer, more in depth, more in detail, literally breaking down the exact program for you. And just to give you guys a brief example of the program here, I don't want to give away like too much of the program, but one of the biggest things about the program is the customization. If you guys have run any of the Strength Studio programs, you guys would know it's like heavily customizable. So you have all these different deadlift variants to choose from, you have all these different bench variants to choose from, you have all these different squat variants to choose from, and we have a lot of guides as to like how you guys could actually utilize these variants in the program and what we recommend. You have these questionnaires here, which basically ask how stressful is your life outside the gym, questions for squat, questions for bench press, questions for deadlift. And what these questionnaires do is they automatically regulate the intensity, the volume, and some of the RPEs in the program. So again, just to give you guys the briefest of examples, but you guys can see here, this is what like a day 2 in the program would look like. I think this is day 2 of like week 1 or something like that. And you guys could see there some of the sets. So it's like 4 background sets on squat, 4 sets of bench, and then 2 squats of deadlift. Let's say it was somebody who, and you guys could also see that it just says deadlift variant. Let's say it was someone who wanted to do, I don't know, pause deadlifts, and let's say they said that, their life wasn't that stressful outside the gym. Let's say they couldn't handle volume and they had bad technique on the squat. let's say the same thing on the bench, couldn't handle volume, bad technique. And let's say on the deadlift, they recover from intensities really, really well. The technique is really, really good. And then they recover from volume really, really well also. You can see how much the program has switched up. So this is now 3 on 3 instead of 2 on 2. If someone wanted to do something other than close grip bench press, they could switch to feet up bench press. You can see that the deadlift sets went up 1 as well. I believe the sets on Nordic curls and stuff like that have changed also. So yeah, not to like, give too much away with the program. You guys could check out the link down in the description to sign up for a discount when the program drops. It's going to be a full-on 15-week program. This is our longest program yet. You guys could use it to prep in the competition and everything like that. But yeah, as I said, you get more details on the program at the link in the description. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I always enjoy making these, and I will be making more in the future. So, peace!